Redacted has learned from our sources of new death totals in Russia and Ukraine that we want to share with you. These numbers are incredibly hard to swallow. Until now, these numbers have not been fully reported on the Russian side specifically, because a lot of people would be upset to hear these numbers. As of today, December 18th, I'm going to throw up our non-pretty graphic here on the screen to walk you through this. The number of people killed in Ukraine, as of today, 1.3 million, 77,045. And here's how that breaks down. Ukrainian soldiers killed is 1,009,367. NATO soldiers killed, including mercenaries, active and contractors, 297,894 dead. Civilians killed by Russia in Ukraine, 1,883. Civilians killed by Ukraine in Ukraine, meaning they have killed a lot of their own people, as you know, and we've been covering that for years. That number is 67,901. 19,149 missing civilians. And across all categories, and of course, we've been reporting on that missing number, which of course is very interesting because a lot of Ukrainian mothers, fathers, they've been classified as missing, therefore they don't have to receive death benefits. And that's how that works in Ukraine. So that number is very high on the missing side, probably dead, unfortunately. Specifically on the civilian side, but on the soldier side too, the missing. Across all categories, that number is 2.3 million people dead in Ukraine, captured, missing, or injured in Ukraine. Now to the Russian side. 642,014 Russians have been killed. Of that number, 182,042 of them are contracted military or mercenaries. The number of Russian civilians killed by Ukraine is 51,874.
Can I ask, are we considering Russians part of the annexed Russia? People who voted to be Russians but were formerly thought to be Ukrainians? Do we know? Maybe we don't know. That's
a good question. Of the civilians killed by Ukraine in Ukraine, that number that we showed you earlier of the 67,000, a large portion of those, of course, former Eastern Ukraine.
Okay.
So to be clear, but I'll get some more distinction on that. The number of Russian civilians injured by Ukraine is 77,411. The number of Russian civilians killed by Russia, 21. The number of Russian civilians killed by Russia, 21. The total, 642,000 killed and 429,000 injured. That number total on the Russian side is 1,076,821. We've also learned that Russia has covertly tested 3 new weapon systems over the past 28 days. 2 of them are complete game changers. This is making the deep state very nervous, as you can imagine, inside of NATO. These haven't been made public yet by President Putin, which he normally does, but these 3 are still being kept quiet. Here's one that isn't being kept secret. Russian President Putin just rolled out their most advanced hypersonic missiles to date, missiles that no one can shoot down unless we're totally wrong about that. We'll get some clarity from Colonel McGregor in a moment on that. This would make NATO really look like a nursery school class with these hypersonic missiles. These are the Oreshnik hypersonic missiles. They're set for combat duty by the end of the year. It's capable of extremely high speeds, long-range strikes. Of course, it marks the development NATO is going to be watching very, very closely. And yet European leaders have some sort of a suicide wish. I mean, you saw all those horrible numbers that we just showed you. They want to be a part of it, I guess. They want to be a part of the death and destruction in the European Union and in the UK, preparing to go to war with Russia directly. German Chancellor Merz said yesterday they are ready to draft young men to war if they can't reach their volunteer numbers. Yes, compulsory service to fight Russia. The UK is telling its populace that they need to get ready to sacrifice their sons and daughters. Watch.
Sons and daughters, colleagues, veterans will all have a part to play, to build, to serve, and if necessary, to fight. And more families will know what sacrifice for our nation means. That's why it's so important that we do explain the changing threat and the need to stay ahead of it. As I've said, I'm clear that the country's first line of defence is the armed forces. We need to be ready to deter, fight and win today and tomorrow.
Yeah. So some sort of a death wish, I don't know. We have a lot of questions to talk about today. Congress yesterday voted against Thomas Massey's war power bill that would have limited the president's ability to bomb Venezuela. And then the other one, of course, which would have limited the president's ability to just bomb in the Western Hemisphere. So there were two different bills. And all of this is happening right now as the Pentagon plans a major reorganization. And our next guest is calling for Pete Hegseth to basically clean house of those four-star generals who are stuck in the past at the Pentagon. Colonel Douglas McGregor is here to weigh in about all of these war developments. Now, Colonel, great to see you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. I actually wish I were out in Colorado, but that's another story.
As close as you are to the craziness in the Beltway, Colonel, I want to put up your piece here. You talk about slashing the military and getting rid of these four-star generals, not to do it halfway. There's plans to basically move away from the era of the past and move into modernity, whatever that would actually look like. You can comment on that and really anything that's on your mind today, because all of these stories are pretty nebulous, I guess.
Oh, great. You're talking about a stream of consciousness interview. I don't get those very much.
I know. I'm feeling it today, though. I just want to hear from you, because a lot of these topics.
Give us some Christmas cheer or lack thereof.
These topics are so damn heady, the numbers we just rattled off and everything that we're seeing,
Well, as somebody once said, this too shall pass. That's the good news. The bad things will not last forever. First of all, on the American military establishment, we have been growing the overhead at a rate that makes no sense now for more than 30 years. We began this process back in the early 80s with what we called a unified command plan. And this was something that Eisenhower tried to implement when he was president, simply said, we have to have theaters. We have to have a direction of activity effort. And then we have to build up the support infrastructure and logistics. We finally got around to that with the Unified Command Plan. And then, of course, by the mid-90s, it became pretty clear that, the justification for this pursuit of global military hegemony was no longer justified, and that we could ratchet back, if you will. We could skim or at least thin the overhead. When I say overhead, we're talking about 43, 44 four-star generals for a force of perhaps 1.18 million. And at the height of the Second World War, this is 1943, early 44, we had 7 four-stars running the entire armed forces. And at that point, we were talking about 6 to 8 million people. So, clearly, we don't need as many people in the 4- and 3-star rank categories. Then along came 2001, and we got this AUMF, this, the authorization for the use of military force. One of the provisions in that was more generals, more admirals. And of course, there's nothing the Pentagon likes more than adding admirals and generals and headquarters. And this sort of thing has gotten out of control. And President Trump understands this, but you have to have a strategy to go from what you've got today to something that's leaner and more effective. And that strategy doesn't exist right now. And that's why I wrote this paper and said, here are 7 points. These are the things that you really need to consider as you go forward. Because what I see happening in the Department of Defense, I'm supposed to say Department of the War, with the Secretary of War, is that they have some good ideas. And they sort of say, well, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Yeah, let's do that, without thinking through carefully the total reorientation of our military power to defense of the United States preeminently, primarily in the Western Hemisphere, and its vital interests. And those vital interests tend to revolve around access to something we call the global commons. That means air, sea, land, space that may be of importance to us, where there are minerals, resources, and so forth. And that's in everybody's interest. And we should be interested not only in our own access, but ensuring access for everybody else. Anyway, that's what it is in a nutshell. And could we go to that? Yes, we can. But you need a plan, a real strategy. And that was the outline of what I tried to present in that article. I don't want to go through it in detail. Everybody will become bored. And that's bad. So we want to keep everybody interested. So I'll tell you, read through the 7 points because it covers the waterfront. And can we do it? Yes. But are we going to get there with what we're doing now? No. And by the way, let's not confuse national defense with intervention in Venezuela. The two are not the same.
Well, right. I mean, the opposite seems to be Secretary Hegseth's vision. Just 2 weeks ago, he gave this speech in the Silicon Valley romanticizing the Reagan era of military expansion, which seems to, I mean, what does he mean by that? And can you explain if that is the antithesis of your vision?
Well, I think he's an advocate for quantitative easing on steroids, because at this point, that's what's going on. I mean, it's being quietly admitted. I think it's becoming more and more public that we've gone back to quantitative easing. We don't call it that, but we're using different kinds of mechanisms to inject liquidity into the system. The problem is that you're debasing the dollar. And we talk about reshoring manufacturing. That's a great idea. That takes decades. It's not something that President Trump can snap his finger and make happen. So right now, I think the order of the day should be pulling in from overseas commitments, reducing the bases overseas. Get out of places where we obviously have no mission anymore. There's no requirement for us to be in Northeast Asia, on the Korean Peninsula, or for that matter in Japan. And the Koreans and the Japanese can handle the requirement. We need to start looking at allies as not so much as dependents, but people who are going to pull their own weight, so that if we're going to be allied with someone, it's a benefit. A great example was in 1905-06, the British came into an alliance with Imperial Japan because they could no longer afford to maintain this enormous Royal Navy in the Pacific. They said, look, we can't afford it, can't do it. Turn to the Japanese. Can you look after our interests? Because we really can't do it. We need a strong presence in the West, strong presence in the Atlantic, in the Mediterranean. Can you help us out? And the Japanese said yes, in return for which the Japanese said, can you help us build up our Navy? Can you assist us with the technology and the training that we need? And of course, the British said yes. And that alliance, by the way, lasted all the way through World War I and into the early 1920s. In other words, the British were prudent and they said, we need to ally with someone else who's strong, who can compensate for where we are weak. We're not doing that. And that's what we should do in the future. And right now, Northeast Asia is a place where we don't need to be. So then you turn to Europe and you ask the same question. You hear every day people in Europe say, oh, we have more resources and more people and more capability than the Russians. Just look at our economy and so forth. Well, if that's true, then what are we doing on the ground in Europe? You know, let's back out of this. Let's start focusing on what's really important to us. That's the kind of thinking that's required, and I think this is a good time to execute it. But unfortunately, that's not what President Trump is doing. It may be what he wants to do, but it's like everything else. You've got to listen to what someone says, but you've also got to watch what they do.
Yes.
And what the Trump administration is doing is an extension of the Biden administration. That's the problem.
Do you see that with Ukraine as well? I mean, we gave you those horrible numbers now off the top of the show. You see the rollout of these new hypersonic missiles. You see the saber rattling from NATO. You heard from Friedrich Merz, the German chancellor, yesterday for compulsory military service if they can't fill their volunteer ranks right now. You've got Germany that's collapsing. You have farmers that are smashing their tractors into the capital in Brussels today and in France. They're demanding a change. They want Ursula von der Leyen out. They are absolutely fed up. And their main mission seems to be, let's go to war with Russia.
Yeah, well, everybody wants Ursula von der Leyen to go away. So I'm assuming that will eventually happen. Yeah. The problem is this. You're right. There's no chance of Europe going to war with Russia. It's not going to happen. When I say Europe, I'm talking about the various members of NATO. They're broke. Their financial condition is terrible. Their living standards are dropping like rocks, especially in Germany, but not just in Germany, in France as well. And this is the globalist regime or class trying desperately to keep the war going, because they know that when the war stops, when it becomes obvious that the Russians aren't coming and there will be no war, they're gone. increasingly people inside Germany and France and Great Britain are figuring out that they've been lied to. What's really depressing is to listen to someone like that British officer who really has an obligation to tell the truth. Just spew out this crazy fiction about a war that Britain absolutely positively does not need to fight and would be suicidal for Britain to even seriously consider. But, you know, you've built this mountain of lies on the assumption that Russia is something it's not. It's the Soviet Union. No, it isn't. It has all the land and resources that it needs. It doesn't necessarily want more territory. If the Russians were even close to what people describe them as being, they would already be on the Polish border. You know, they certainly have been willing to sustain losses in order to kill the enemy and win. And they have just taken in hundreds of thousands of additional manpower that they're going to train and equip and put into the army. They are ready to fight. And that's what Putin's message was. And that's what everybody should hear very quickly. He said repeatedly, we're not interested in going to war with anybody in Europe. We're not interested in conquering Europe. And if you don't like the way we're conducting operations at Ukraine, you need to understand something. We don't want to kill Orthodox Christian Slavs. We're not trying to kill Ukrainians. We'd rather not. We want to put an end to this. We want a neutral Ukraine that will not be hostile to us in the future, that will not present a threat to us. That's what we're doing. However, if you attack us, we are prepared for war, and you will find out what real war is, because that's not what we have waged in Ukraine.
So where is the anti-war movement best represented in America right now? Because on Wednesday night, everyone on X freaked out that President Trump was going to make a war announcement. And really what he did was kind of a victory lap of the things that he liked the best about his second administration. And so we breathed a sigh of collective relief. But on the same day, Congress declined to vote in favor of withdrawal from Venezuela. And the Senate passed the new defense budget, which prevents the president from withdrawing from Europe and South Korea. So Congress is saying, when you're ready, we're going to let you do whatever you're going to do whenever you're ready, sir. Both sides.
Like dogs rolling over that, you know, you want to rub their stomach.
So we didn't get the war announcement, but we are inching towards it in several hemispheres. So where is the anti-war movement best represented in American politics besides independent media?
I think, interestingly enough, in the banking system and with the Fed, because we're going to go bankrupt. We are on the verge of complete financial disaster. And you can bring on Peter Schiff or Luke Groman or Mohammed El-Arian or Nassim Taleb or anybody else. They will all tell you the same thing. Taylor Kenney, Natalie Brunell, they're out there and they've been telling you exactly what's coming. Nobody has listened. And the goal is to anesthetize the American people. What do you do with them? You tell them everything's fine. I'm giving you more freebies next year, more free money, lower taxes. And in the meantime, we have this button over here and it says print more money, and they hit the button and out comes more dollars that flow into people's bank accounts. And they're saying, don't worry, be happy. It's not going to last. We are on the verge of free falling into an abyss, the likes of which no one has seen since the Depression. And everybody with a brain knows that and has said so. Now, in the meantime, why is Congress not recognizing this? Because it's not popular. They're afraid to tell the truth. It's easier to lie, frankly. And remember, every congressman wears a little American flag up here on the lapel. And that's in the left hand, he has the flag he waves. And the other hand is held out for the lobbyists, whoever they are, whether it's the Israel lobby, the pharmaceutical lobby, the agricultural lobby, whatever it is, Monsanto, all the big donors. And that's what's happening. And they know that their donors won't give them any money unless they spend money. All you have to do is ask the average congressman or senator, what do you do up here in Washington, D.C.? And they will tell you, we spend money. Yeah. And they say, if we don't spend money, we have no job. That's what we do. And we're rewarded for spending money by donations. And we're rewarded by our constituents. We get reelected because we keep shoveling money in directions that are rewarding to us, whether they make any sense. In other words, there is no national interest involved. It's a collective interest, but it's a collective interest in self-enrichment and perpetuating themselves in office, and that's it. And no one is going to figure this out until we collapse, and that's what we're going to do in 2026.
Something else that's not in our national interest, and that's a great answer, Colonel. We'll get you out of here on this, though, which is we have no interest. Ask any American, do you have an interest in being in Syria? And I'm sure the families of those soldiers who just landed on the tarmac, President Trump, Pete Hegseth there, saluting as the caskets are rolled out of these American service members who were killed in Syria for what? Colonel, why are we there, and why did these men have to die?
When I was handed the note in mid-November in the White House with a list of places that the president wanted to get out of, the one on top was Afghanistan. And then underneath it said, if you can do it, get us out of Iraq, Syria, and then there was some discussions about reducing our presence in Germany and so forth. And I went around and I began trying to figure out how we could get out. And at one point I said, well, explain Syria and Iraq. What are we doing there? And I got a mix of answers, but I said, it doesn't make any sense to me. We no longer have a mission there. I'm sure there are still ISIS remnants, but there will always be ISIS remnants in that part of the world. And I was finally told we have to be there for Israel. I said, why would Israel need to have us in Syria or Iraq? Oh, well, it's for their security. I said, the Israelis have the best intelligence network in the region. They know about things infinitely more important than we do. They know before we do. So what are we doing there? We have to be there for Israel. So I think the answer to the families in Iowa and to anybody else that loses anyone in the region is very simple. We are there for Israel. Now, that doesn't go down with you very well. If you're offended by that, then you need to tell the people that represent you. You got a 50-50 chance that they'll listen to you. But as long as they get the stipendium from the particular lobby that keeps them in office, if you're in Iowa or Nebraska, you're going to listen not just to the Israel lobby, you're going to listen to the people that represent the agricultural interests. So all of these things are at play right now. And so when you ask the question, Massey tried very hard to make it clear that Congress should exercise its authority and constrain the president's ability to begin a new war in Venezuela. And he got nowhere. What happened to the Constitution? What happened to the history of this country and the understanding we have that you've got to go and get a declaration of war from Congress? Well, it went out in '65. It's never come back. And no one has an incentive to do anything different. And until you kill a lot of Americans on one day, 200, 300, what we saw in the Marine barracks in Lebanon in 1981, 82, you'll remember that under President Reagan. What happened? We left.
Right.
And until that happens, and it could in Venezuela, we don't know, nothing will change.
Whose babies have to die for that to happen? That's the thing that haunts me, is that Matt Gaetz put up a bill to withdraw from Syria in 2023, and it went nowhere. And the media instead framed him as a pervert so that they didn't have to face this reality. Those boys would be alive if Matt Gaetz' bill had gone anywhere. And that's haunting, isn't it?
Well, it's worse than haunting. It's just a national disgrace.
Yeah.
But you have to turn back to the American people. And remember, Obama tried to launch strikes into Syria. He had an entire strike package ready to go. We were going to intervene in Syria. Everybody was cheering our intervention in the Syrian civil war, McCain, Graham, everybody. And suddenly it all fell apart because Americans called the White House and they called Congress. And they raised hell and said, we don't want to be in another war in the Middle East. Forget it. And so Obama came to the podium where he was going to announce the strike, and he announced that he's not going to strike, and he walked away. So the point is, these politicians, as weak characters as most of them may be, they do pay attention to the American public. when they register their indignation at the ballot box and when they threaten to never vote for these people again. So I would say if you are concerned about this as an American citizen, do it. Send telegrams, get on the internet, send emails, get on the phone, call it and say, I don't want this. If you do in great enough numbers, there's a good chance it won't happen.
Yeah, from those districts, exactly. I mean, we're in the Lauren Boebert district. We got on the phone, called her office.
She voted against it.
Yeah, so anyway, Colonel McGregor, always great to see you. Thank you for your sobering insight as always, and we hope you have a very Merry Christmas, you and your family there in Virginia. Thanks as always. Give our best to your lovely family, and thank you so much for all of your insights this year. We really appreciate it.
Same to you and Natalie and your children, and I expect next year you'll speak better Portuguese.
Well,
Natalie is the expert on Portuguese. Obviously.
No.
Não vá.
No, muito bem. No, muito bem. No, it's not going to happen.
Okay.
Colonel,
Faz mal.
Great New Year, too.
Great seeing you. Happy New Year as well, and Merry Christmas. Thanks, Colonel.
Bye-bye.
All right.